My name is Johnny Litchi. I work for Arrowsmith Press, and I'm here with Kythe Heller, the author of the excellent collection, Firebird. So Firebird, it opens up with a verse by an anonymous Sufi poet, while the Resonance of Allah is quoted elsewhere. What significance do these passages have within the collection to you, and what significance do they have to you personally?
Yeah, that's such a great place to start. Thank you for your questions and for taking the time to read my book and to sort of think through what you'd like to ask about it. I really appreciate that. I think I just have to start by acknowledging the kind of situation we're in as I answer these questions and speak to you here right now. I mean, first of all, it's such a odd moment for a poetry book to come out in, right? So, I mean, here we are, like, we're in a situation where 40 million Americans have just lost their job. We have a situation where George Floyd has just been murdered by police, and it's sparked off incredible protests and, you know, a sense of just grief and intense anger and desire for change all over the country. It's been boiling for a while. There are more than 108,000 people, I think was the most recent count I saw, who have just lost their lives and passed beyond our care from the COVID-19 pandemic. So here we are, and this book of poetry, you know, called Firebird, it has arrived at this moment. And I just, you know, I was thinking, like, how can a book of poetry even have any meaning at all at this time? You know, how is it even relevant to have a book of poetry come out? There's a lot of more direct action work to be done right now. And I was thinking about it a little bit more and thinking, okay, well, what is the most essential thing about this book? And if you just take the key image of the book, which is this firebird, this phoenix creature, you know, I think it occurred to me that many of us can really relate maybe right now to feeling like our entire lives have been burnt down to the ground. In actual life, you might end up homeless, you might be poor, crazy, suicidal, you know, you might be a victim of police violence or any kind of abuse. And all of these things are about what the Firebird is, but it's also about the possibility of change and transformation. And I think that is a really important message and an important thing to try to understand and interrogate at this time. So these two passages that you mentioned in the book by the anonymous Sufi poet and by Bawa Muhyiddin, who wrote The Resonance of Allah, they're incredibly important. And they're both from the Sufi Islamic tradition. And I just kind of want to go off for a little moment about this word, which is like one of the names of God in the Sufi tradition. It's Ya Kahar. It's one of the names of Allah, invoked often in Sufi Islamic mystical practice. And it means something that's almost totally untranslatable in English, but it relates to and evokes this kind of like searing of meat, right? So the searing effect that fire has when it singes a piece of meat to get the juices flowing. And this word involves that fire. It involves this kind of sense of continuously becoming yourself, you know, and the overwhelming power deep, deep down of longing and yearning for something, this passionate yearning, this fire of love. And it acts on the piece of meat, by which I mean the heart, right? And the presence of Ya Kahar affects you with this kind of yearning passion or burning. So regardless of everything else that might be present in your life, you continually long for something secretly inside yourself. So if you want to call it God or nature or whatever tradition you're from, you know, for lack of a better word, what is this thing that's burning in your heart? You know, no drugs or alcohol or sex or money, prestige, anything else will really extinguish it. So this is the unquenchable flame that Sufi poets have talked about and described and written about, sung about for centuries, right? And this is exactly what we're experiencing now, where everything falls apart, but you are still going to burn with this kind of secret flame. So you might be living during a pandemic and have lost your job and have to support a family, and it all might feel like a fire, but the secret burning kind of overwhelms everything else and makes all of this worldly destruction seem ultimately small in comparison, right? And there's another meaning of it, which is inside, inwardly, this burning of love destroys everything that's holding you back too, like the shame, the guilt, and the feelings of worthlessness, because it develops a kind of strength in you that arises from a true self-worth as the hollow shell of the self and all its problems burns up until only the light of the fire is still there. So it's this shift of identity that occurs, and you're melted down and become the flame. You simply are. And the burning power of the flame of this love has no beginning or end. It's not kindled, it doesn't go out. And it burns away all attachment except your inherent relationship with that unity. And so it redefines you, and the raw meat of your heart, it gets cooked. So one last thing I wanted to talk about, these two passages, really just to make, to kind of give you a sense of where they're coming from. But Ya Kahar, like that's this fire of longing. And the poem at the beginning of the book, which really describes a life being burnt down and being changed, transformed. This poem I've had, access to for a really long time. It was given to me originally, I think I was 18, maybe I was just starting college, by a lover at that time. And he just like slipped it under the door of my room. And it was this torn photocopy from a book he'd found somewhere. And he could never find the book again, strangely. But he wrote a penciled question on the back, and it just said, "What do you think of this?" And actually, like, we never talked about it. So I never really addressed his question, but I carried this poem with me for years and years. In fact, I still have it now in an old journal, because somehow it just explained my whole life. This book of poems is kind of the beginning of a response to what do you think of this? And the second passage, it's sort of related. Muhammad Rahim Bawa Mohyuddin is the author of that passage. And he's my Sufi teacher, and he really describes more beautifully than should even be possible the actual moment of this melting of the heart and the disintegration of self, and what's on the other side of that, something almost impossible to describe. But it's from a book of his called The Resonance of Allah. So that's like this.
No, that was amazing. I think like it's very I'm glad that you started with all the stuff with George Floyd and the police brutality, because it does feel it is that's where the conversation needs to start, like all the time with everything now. This book, it is in conversation with that. Then I think that's why really good poetry and really good literature, really good art is constantly in conversation with the change in society that is constantly happening. That's the only constant, right? Is that things will, as much as they stay the same and history repeats itself, it is constantly evolving. Particularly, a quote that I didn't mention is the one about the world is always burning. it always has been burning. You put it beautifully how it relates both to the world that is within inside you, but also this, you know, this outer existence that all of us are forced to reckon with. But I think that's why talking about poetry now and having a collection come out is important. Fighting the stuff head on right now feels so insurmountable, I think, is the way that I feel constantly with it. It is so much to process, but you know, that's why I think, you know, art has a place, because it is trying to interrogate these things too, just maybe in a different way.
Absolutely. And really, poetry is one of the only arts that allows you to describe what it is to be a human in this life with the full range of all emotions that you might have at a particular moment, you know? And I think events like this, in so many ways, all of the different events that are happening concurrently, like, they really all are trying to press us to shut down, you know, to shut down our human response to each other, to shut down even the sense of staying inside and not going out and having a normal life. Even though we're protecting other people, there's still a sense in which we have to fight against our own feeling of being closed off from each other, you know? So, I mean, poetry opens up those channels, kind of like those secret inner channels of human emotion and human connection. And I think that's another reason it's so important right now.